forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
And welcome to Game Week here on Bigger Ten. I know it seemed like it would never arrive, but we are here. We're going to talk actual games, actual college football, and yes, it seems weird. We had snow here in the Midwest earlier this week. Halloween is just around the corner. This is normally the time of year we'd be talking about, all right, head into November, crunch time in the conference races. What bowl game is everybody going to? The playoff ratings. Except it's just cranking up here in the Big Ten, but better late than never, I always say. And I'm alongside my partner, who's always late, our good friend Aaron McIntire. Brother, how are you? You ready to go?
Always late. That's unfortunately true. But yeah, I'm ready to go. It feels weird. I think it's just this year, though. The way this year is shaken out, and it's just... if this global pandemic was in any other year other than the one that we're in right now, I think I'd be a lot more excited. I'm still excited. Still got the butterflies in my stomach, but I just think it's just like another shrimp on the Barbie right now. There's so much going on right now, so it's hard to just focus in on this one kind of trivial thing at the moment.
See, I don't have the butterflies at all. I have to keep reminding myself that I'm going to see Michigan play a football game, presumably. There's a lot of COVID rumors with Minnesota. I'm sure we'll get into that. But I have to keep reminding myself I'm going to see Michigan play a football game for the first time since New Year's Day. I mean, on one hand, it seems like I saw Michigan play 10 minutes ago. And on the other hand, it seems like I last watched them play 10 years ago. So I don't know that I'll get the butterflies, man, until they come out of the tunnel or kick off. It just won't quite hit home for me. Nevertheless, we're excited. It's an intriguing slate of games, a lot of different things to talk about this week in the Big Ten. So let's get to it. Let's get to our Big Five here on Big Ten. And where should we begin? Where do you want to start?
Let's go with the trends that you put together. You have a list of the top trends to know in the Big Ten, Steve.
Yeah, heading into this season, there's some interesting news nuggets, as Aaron said, some trend lines looking at where things stand in the conference heading in to the 2020 season. Let's begin. Let's take these one by one. All right. Nebraska has lost at least 4 games every year for 16 consecutive seasons.
There's no way that's true.
That's an incredible stat, but it is true. Yes.
16 years.
Yeah. Now, you were born, what, 1993?
1993, yeah.
So I believe from 1969 to 2001, Nebraska won at least 9 games every year. And keep in mind, we didn't go to the 11 and 12 game schedule until 1971. So they won at least 9 games every year for those, going on 35 years? Since that run ended, though, 16 straight seasons, they've lost at least 4 games every season.
You know, Sirius Black only spent, 12 years in Azkaban? Nebraska.
What a reference.
You would think, you'll like that.
Yeah.
This audience probably has no idea what I'm talking about. No, that's... For a program the stature or perceived or deserved of Nebraska, it's just an astounding stat.
I mean, it's a top 5 winningest program of all time. It's one of only a handful of schools that has at least 900 wins. They were the team of the 90s, but they're a long way from home from those days. Let's continue on because there's a ton of these trends to get to. Ohio State is vying to become the first team in conference history to win 4 consecutive undisputed, meaning unshared, 4 consecutive undisputed Big Ten championships. It's never happened before in Big Ten history. Ohio State trying to be the pioneer here. Michigan, which has the most Big Ten championships with 42, is mired in its longest conference title drought in school history, 15 years and counting. By the way, Michigan and Ohio State have combined for 42, 38, 80 Big Ten championships. The league first started playing football in 1879. So keep that in mind.
Can I interject something here real
Sure.
quick? If you would have given me like 100-1 odds 5 years ago that Ohio State would win the next 4 Big Ten championships in a row, I'm like 100-1 odds, great odds, but that's just throwing your money away just because you just think it's so hard to do that. Now, on the other side of that, yeah, I'd put money down on Ohio State to win to win the 4th in a row. Similarly, if you would have told me 16 years ago, I'll give you 1,000-1 odds that Michigan is not going to win a Big Ten championship in the next 15 years.
Yeah.
I would have been like, no, they're bound to get one in there at one point.
I know.
So it's just
what if I gave you 10,001 odds on December 30th, 2014, the day Jim Harbaugh was hired? What if I gave you 10,001 odds that Jim Harbaugh would either not beat Ohio State or win the Big Ten in his first 5 years at Michigan?
Those two things together, it's like
I know
10,001 odds. You're still just throwing your money away.
Yeah, I know. Let's continue. Some of these trends, as you've seen already, they're pretty astonishing. The Big Ten has had a Heisman Trophy finalist the past 4 consecutive seasons. You got to think Justin Fields is a good bet to make it 5 in a row. If not, maybe a Rondale Moore, somebody like that has a special season. Minnesota and Indiana have gone the longest between Big Ten championships. They each shared the title for their last piece of a Big Ten championship with Purdue back in 1967. That's a long drought. That's almost a decade before I was born. Continuing on.
Wow, that is a long time ago.
Nice. Minnesota hasn't been to the Rose Bowl as the Big Ten champion since 1960. That's the longest ongoing drought in our conference. Northwestern, I love this stat. Northwestern has had 9 seasons of 9 or more wins in all of school history, and Pat Fitzgerald either coached or played for 7 of them. He basically is Northwestern football. But you know me, I love me some Pat Fitzgerald. You know that.
It's funny going back to the Nebraska thing. Wasn't Bo Pelini fired because he only won 9 games
every
season?
year? Yeah. We'll talk about remarkable consistency. How about your team, Aaron? Iowa won 7 to 9 games, 7 of the last 10 seasons in the just concluded decade, and then the other 3 seasons, 4, 12, and 10 wins. So, I mean, Iowa, book it down. Pretty much every year, 7 to 10 wins over the last decade. The decline of Michigan State's program in one stat after winning 11 games or more 5 out of 6 seasons. The Spartans have now lost 6 or more games 3 of the last 4 seasons.
That's pretty
stark. That's
yeah.
Jekyll and hiding things right there.
I mean, I would say those last 2. If Kirk Ferentz had won or lost 6 or more games 3 of the last 4 seasons, the 2015 season notwithstanding, he'd be on the hot seat right now.
I think he might have been gone.
Probably.
I agree.
With as long as he's been there.
I think with how do you get a stat like what Michigan State has right there? You have one recruiting class that wrecks you. Okay. Yeah. And they I think it was their 2016 class
coming out their Big Ten championship
with a bunch of guys that ended up, with rape allegations and everything else. That recruiting class it was like wiped completely out almost, and they just have never been able to recover from it. Now the league is too good, too deep. That the pool of talent that they have been dealing with has just continued to get shallower and shallower. All right, let's continue. COVID-19 has maybe stopped James Franklin from potentially accomplishing a feat that not even Joe Paterno ever realized at Penn State, reaching 11 wins in 4 out of 5 seasons. Joe Paterno never did that. And now with the COVID-shortened season, they technically could still do it if they had no cancellations this year, went undefeated, won the Big Ten championship, and then got to, I think, the college football national championship game. They could still conceivably do it. But obviously, the odds of that are pretty low.
I don't like Penn State just as a fan, of course. But is it just me, or do they have like the quietest 11-win seasons of any college football team?
It is weird, yeah, because this isn't Happy Valley's a remote outpost geographically, but in terms of the college football map, I mean, this is one of the top 10 programs in the history of our sport. It's not like they have one of the largest alumni bodies on planet Earth. It's not like this is some insignificant team, right? I mean, this has been a nationally renowned program for my entire life, and certainly yours. It is odd that they have accumulated this many wins under James Franklin, and except for Saquon Barkley's exploits, they've done it relatively quietly. You're right about that. Speaking of great running backs in Big Ten lore, Jonathan Taylor is leaving some big shoes to fill at Wisconsin. Look at these numbers. He finished in the top 10 in Big Ten history in rushing attempts, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns, and he only played in 3 seasons, which means if he were coming back this year with the offensive line they have, although the season is shortened, but he might have set some records that, I don't know, him and Rondane, just kind of stand alone and maybe never get broken, right? Purdue and Rondale Moore. He could become only the 3rd player to lead the Big Ten in receiving yards twice in his career since Heisman Trophy winner Desmond Howard did it almost 30 years ago. So this is not something that happens very often. I think Lee Evans at Wisconsin was one of the players that did it. I can't recall off the top of my head who the other player was, but Rondale Moore would be, if he does it, only the 3rd player in the last 30 years to lead the Big Ten in receiving yards twice in his collegiate career.
Quickly, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. I mean, what would it take for Rondale Moore to have that quote-unquote special season and be a contender for the Heisman? It's going to be tough for anybody in the Big Ten because they're not going to have this big of a sample size as ACC, but all the other teams that have been playing right now. But what would it take?
I think he'd have to, we're talking like 250 all-purpose yards every game. Barry Sanders-like numbers, because I don't think they're going to win enough games, if you know what I'm saying. And because you have a player who's similar to him at Alabama, like a Jalen Waddle, he's going to he's putting up huge numbers, and he's on the number 1 team. So I think for Rondale Moore, it's got to be a Barry Sanders-like season where statistically you're just like, okay, we can't ignore that. We just have to acknowledge it. And I think he's capable of something like that, because I also think they're not going to be very good on defense at the exact same time. So he's going to get a lot of opportunities to do stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Ohio State quarterbacks have led the Big Ten in passer rating the last 3 consecutive seasons, and 5 of the last 7. That's 3 different quarterbacks, by the way. J.T. Barrett, Dwayne Haskins, and Justin Fields.
Just unbelievable.
And then 5 of the last 7. So back to that very first, that one of the very first stats, 4 consecutive undisputed championships. How do you do that? Potentially, this stat right here tells you how you did that. Because you had the best player at the most important position pretty much perennially. That's it right there.
You can't hide your quarterback.
No, I heard somebody say that once. Smart guy.
What happens, though, when you have a quarterback that you show off? That stat right there, over and over again, multiple quarterbacks.
Shows you have the best program in the conference.
Yep.
Justin Fields could be the 8th Big Ten quarterback in just the last 40 years to lead the league in passer rating in consecutive seasons. By the way, the first player to do that, he coaches in the Big Ten now. Jim Harbaugh was the first player in Big Ten history to do that. And since then, there have been 7 other players that have led the Big Ten in passer rating in consecutive seasons over the last 40 years. Since Brett Moss in 1993, Wisconsin has boasted the Big Ten's leading rusher, Aaron, 13 times. That's the most in the conference.
That is half my lifetime.
Yeah.
That's half my lifetime that they've had the best rusher in the conference. Last year it was the same, I believe, right? So they're due for an off year.
Jonathan Taylor, when you throw in the postseason, Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins, I think, ended up with exact same amount of rushing yards, 2003. So I think they tied. But yeah, it would still stand because, that's tied for best. You bet. The late, great Beano Cook always used to say he never understood why Illinois didn't win more, given their population base. Well, since we went to the 11/12 game schedule in college football in 1971, the Illini have just 3 double-digit win seasons. Now, that 1983 team is a historical footnote because the Big Ten flirted with going to a pure round robin for 2 seasons in 1982 and 83. So you only played 2 non-conference games, and then you played all other Big Ten teams. There were 9 conference games those 2 years, all right? And Illinois, it became the first team, and they still might be the only team, to win the Big Ten championship by beating every other team in the Big Ten, all right? That team went 9-0 in the Big Ten in 1983 with Tony Eason, I think it was, at quarterback, who went on to be the backup that got killed in the Super Bowl by the Bears. The 1989 team, people might remember the name Jeff George, and they had a tremendous defense on that team. And then the 2001 team with Kurt Kittner, that was their last Big Ten champion. Those are the only 3 times Illinois has double-digit wins since the sport went to 11/12 game schedules in 1971. Wow. That's not many, by the way. Most current players on NFL rosters in the Big Ten, Ohio State, no surprise, number 1 at 50. They're number 1 in all of college football, by the way. But Penn State and Michigan are neck and neck, and they're both ranked in the top 7 in all of college football. Iowa's not very far behind. Wisconsin right there as well. You have any thoughts on those numbers?
With the top 3, you kind of have to expect that with the amount of recruiting that you get. And then with Iowa and Wisconsin, you also come to expect that with the amount of players that they are able to develop and actually turn around from 3 to 5, from 3-star athletes or 3-star recruits into actual legitimate NFL contributors. So not very surprising right there.
That's well said. Minnesota's Tanner Morgan, he posted the 3rd best passer rating in Big Ten history last season. Unfortunately, everybody forgot because he finished behind Justin Fields. By the way, do you want to know how good Russell Wilson was? His 1 season in our league at Wisconsin. So Justin Fields, we have like 35 touchdowns and like 2 interceptions or something last year. All right. He had the 2nd best passer rating in Big Ten history last year. He finished 10 points behind Russell Wilson.
Really?
Yeah. That's how good Russell Wilson was that 1 year at Wisconsin. How about them apples?
Good gravy.
All right, how many more? Was that it?
1 more.
All right, 1 more. Only twice in the last 15 years has the Big Ten not had a defensive player reach 20 tackles or loss, 20 tackles for loss or more in a season. But given the shortened season this year, this fall could very well be the 3rd. So that's something to think about on the defensive side of the ball. All right, let's go to our next story here. I don't even know what to say about this. We talked a lot about it this summer when it was the biggest story in college football for a while. But now 8 former University of Iowa football players, 8 black former University of Iowa football players, including a couple of big names like Akram Wadley, they are demanding $20 million in the firings of University of Iowa athletics director Gary Barta, head coach Kirk Ferentz, offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz, for racial discrimination. University of Iowa says we, quote, respectfully decline your monetary and personnel demands, end quote. Looks like a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit is next. Now, we did a show on this when this story was blazing this past summer, July, August, right? And the university did its audit, released its report in August. So we're almost 2 months since the University of Iowa released its report, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not here to discuss the merits of their claims because we don't know. That's why we have a legal process to ferret these things out, right? And each side brings their best evidence, and juries or judges decide these things, and then we find out what we get to know in the court of public opinion, right? Okay. So we're not here to adjudicate their case. We are here, though, to question the timing of this. I mean, this story droned on for months. It's been 2 months at least, I think, since the university released its report on its findings on this matter. It's not like they didn't have time. Instead, they waited until the first official game week of the year, and then they make this play. And you want to talk, I hate to, either these guys have a stunning lack of self-awareness, and they just totally forgot as former college football players when the season goes on and what preseason preparations are required, or it's specifically timed to hurt Iowa right at the start of a season that's already full of distractions anyway, with daily testing and everything else. I don't know why they could not have done this in August or September, or waited until January when the season was over. And that's my issue. Their claims will get their day in court or won't, one way or the other. But to time this when they did, there's a lot of players on this year's Iowa team, both black and white, They put in a lot of work to play these next 8 weeks. And you're not doing them any favors by dropping a distraction bomb on them like this right as the season gets going, Aaron.
Yeah, it reeks of pettiness and childishness, and I don't care. I don't care what these guys have done on the field. Akram Wadley was obviously the biggest name that signed on to this lawsuit, and I don't care what they did on the field. They provided a lot of entertainment for Iowa fans, a lot of exciting moments as well, I'm sure, and contributed to the team in numerous ways as well. I don't really care about all of that because it's complete and utter foolishness and pettiness to do this right now. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing, and that is just a level of pettiness that either comes
it's a douche
from
move, bro.
That either comes from an incredibly dark and bitter soul or from a 4-year-old. Let's just be honest about that. Here's a tweet from Akram Wadley, June 7th of this year. Seeing too much negativity. I'm for change. I'm not into bashing anybody. I shared a story that didn't include any names because I chose not to. I'm also not saying anybody should be fired because that's not my place. I'm just for change. I have a younger brother. I want to be fine. That doesn't sound... Either he was lying then or he's lying now. So this is completely petty, childish, class action lawsuit now. Really? You know, they spent an inordinate amount of time, in my opinion, the Iowa football program did. They hired a lawyer to look into these racial allegations. Do you think the firm that they hired to look through this fine-tooth comb, we talked about it at the time as well, talking about drinking too much Gatorade and things of that nature, they really seemed like they looked into the details here. Do you really think that they would have come back with the verdict that they did? If there were blatant and blazing examples of the type of racism or the degree of racism, I guess, that's being alleged here. Maybe. Nobody's perfect.
If that's the case, then you should be demanding the firing of the school president and the member. You should be going after the board of trustees. Correct me if I'm wrong. Akram Wadley's last year was 2017, correct?
Yeah.
So he's got former teammates of his on this year's team.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally just dropped a deuce on him right before the season gets started.
Yep.
It's a douche move, bro. It's a douche move. You have legitimate grievances. That's why we have courts of law. You can see if you've got the evidence for them to be heard. You couldn't have filed this in September. You couldn't have filed it in January. You're going to do it now to your former teammates. Just a douche move, man. All right. Same game. This opening week for Purdue and Iowa.
2020 in a nutshell.
It's the whole year.
Yep.
The whole year is this game. All right. So Iowa dealing with the racial unrest, right? Purdue now dealing with COVID. Jeff Brom was the first coach to test positive. They confirmed it via PCR. He is out for this game on Saturday. Probably, or at the very least, he's one of the top 2 or 3 play callers in our league. I think that's a huge loss for Purdue. I think this, we just discussed, is a huge distraction for Iowa. I mean, dude, I wouldn't bet this game with your money, Aaron. I mean, I think this game is being won or lost this week, right now. Which of these teams is better able to put these distractions behind them and prepare for Saturday? But how big of a loss do you think this is for the Boilermakers, not having Jeff Brom and his ability to adjust and see things and call plays, having him on the sideline Saturday?
Well, you know who Purdue's offensive coordinator is, right?
Is his brother, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but it's really him. He's really Purdue's offensive coordinator.
Man, I was really hoping you wouldn't know that. Because then I was going to actually completely blew up the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your phallus. My bad.
No, go ahead.
I mean, the brother has the title.
Yeah.
All right. But let's face it. Jeff's the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be on Saturday.
He's not going to be on Saturday. Here's the deal, though, with Purdue. They have not started seasons exceedingly well under Jeff Brom. You don't need to when you've got David Bell and Rondale Moore. What do you think was going to be in their playbook other than get it in those guys' hands? How complicated is that?
Throw it to those guys a lot. I get it, but it is also, hey, is there a route or a concept? Was there some adjustment that you kind of kept in your back pocket? Because here's the thing, the brother, you have to assume, knows his stuff and is smart, but now he's not just the OC, he's coaching this team on Saturday. So it's not just his job that he's doing, but his brother's job at the exact same time. So, hey, timeout situation, I've got to monitor that. Does a play call, does a route combination, does an adjustment something like that get missed in this game because the other Brom has got too much on his plate, and so that was lost. And then they don't score a touchdown at the end of the half, and Iowa wins 31-27 because it's a field goal spread in the game, right? That's where I think you see the loss of a Jeff Brom. Potentially.
Agreed. Iowa doesn't look super crisp either coming right out of the gate. I think they look a little bit better, and I think just the way their style of play, I think it lends itself to maybe starting out of the gates a little bit slower as well.
Just keep this in mind, Aaron. They've got a new defensive coordinator at Purdue, too.
Yeah.
So no Jeff Brom, new defensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator's got to handle those issues. This would be the kind of moment for Iowa, given what they are as a program culturally, that just sets up for them perfectly just to win the game because they know who they are and what their identity is.
Yep.
But we don't know what the state of that culture is because of everything that's gone on.
Yeah.
I mean, basically at the very end of his career, Kirk Ferentz has got to become a life coach. Go from disciplinarian to, how do you guys feel about things? What do you guys think? Are you happy with everything? And maybe it'll work great. I don't know. But I don't know how anybody knows how that will work itself out.
Agreed. And I just think this is either going, well, it could be both things, but I think this is going to be an extremely sloppy game, at least has the chance to be that way, or it's going to be a very high-scoring game because you don't know what Spencer Petrus's tendencies are. You just mentioned the new defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Iowa, they do fine on defense early in the season, but then again, they don't start out most years against Rondale Moore and David Bell either. So there's going to be probably a lot of miscommunication there as well. You're replacing some key pieces on the defensive line.
Yeah, you're replacing your best pass rusher. Because you don't want, this is not a team, Iowa doesn't blitz a lot anyway. Purdue is not a team you're going to want to blitz a lot with those two receivers. Yeah. All right, you're going to want to be able to get pressure on your front four. So that's a good segue. These are like early leans because it's just midweek and you're still waiting for COVID testing results and everything else. But let's look at this week's slate of games. All right, so these are early leans. Friday night, Illinois at Wisconsin, huge revenge spot for the Badgers. Remember, they got upset by Illinois. This was the game that kind of propelled Illinois to its bowl season last year, but no Jack Cohn as Graham Mertz attempts to Wally Pip him. A ton of questions on offense for Wisconsin at the skill positions. Illinois does bring back quite a bit from last year. I'm very surprised this spread is 4 full touchdowns. I mean, I would lean Wisconsin, but I think that number's a little outrageous.
That number is definitely outrageous. Guys, your starting quarterback is going to make his first start, right? Graham Mertz?
I think it's possible Wisconsin won't score 24 points.
Yeah.
And win the game or score
21 to nothing.
Or 21-3 or something like that. Or 24-10. Yeah.
Yeah, the turnovers, which obviously helped propel the uncharacteristic turnovers by Wisconsin last year, which obviously helped propel Illinois to that huge upset. Those things don't tend to go a certain team's way 2 years in a row. But at the same time, there's just too many moving parts being replaced on Wisconsin's side. I do agree that they're probably going to have the chip on their shoulder, but 28.5 is ridiculous.
Nebraska at Ohio State is a game that just would have sounded great 15 years ago. And now it kind of sounds like 42-14. That's kind of what it sounds like right now. I don't know what you're thinking. All right. I think we agree. We'll move on. Rutgers at Michigan State. 2 new head coaches, Greg Schiano, who of course took Rutgers to unprecedented heights, Mel Tucker at Michigan State. I'm not so sure Rutgers doesn't have the better coach. Oh, I know they have the better coach. I don't know that I think they might have the better quarterback with Noah Vedral, the former Nebraska quarterback who then went to Oregon State and then came back here to play for Rutgers, because we've seen Rocky Lombardi play at Michigan State. So I don't know, man.
I'm going Rutgers. I might throw like $2 on Rutgers money line as well.
Dude, if Rutgers wins that game, oh my.
And then on Saturday night, I'm going to be like, Aaron, don't bet on bad teams. Don't bet on bad. And that's what this is going to end up being. But
all right, Penn State and Indiana. This is, other than of course my favorite team, this is the game I have my eye on. Now we have no Journey Brown for Penn State. That's a huge loss. Now they've recruited very well at the running back spot, but he's more than just that. I mean, screens, kickoff returns. He's not as overall explosive, but he's a mini Saquon for them. Now you take away Micah Parsons, their most explosive player on defense, who opted out and didn't come back. Now you've got Journey Brown out with an illness. He's their most explosive player on the other side of the ball on offense. Indiana, Michael Penix healthy. Stevie Smith in the backfield. A healthy Whop Fillier out there on the outside. I don't know, man. This smells like a bit of an ambush to me. The line says like they're begging you to take Penn State. Ranked in the top 10 of the AP poll, Indiana only got 4 votes last week, and yet Penn State's barely a touchdown favorite in this game. I smell a trap. It's a trap. I smell a trap here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of this. I try not to do this game when reading lines. You can get into trouble. You can do the triple reverse psychiatry,
sure,
4-dimensional chess here. But I think there is probably a smaller case to be made that you can make the opposite. They might be begging you to take Indiana. What? Indiana's only a 6.5 point underdog. You know, what's going on here? I'm getting 6 points with your 6.5 points with Indiana, and all these guys are out. You can really talk yourself into anything here, but this is one that I would probably actually stay away from.
Been a 1-possession game last 2 years too, by the way.
Yeah.
We've talked at length about Iowa at Purdue, which is the 2020 all game.
Yep.
The two things that have dominated the headlines more than anything else coming to a head in that game. Maryland at Northwestern, big story here, of course. Who's the starting quarterback for Maryland? Is it Tua's little brother? Is it Justin Jackson? And then Northwestern, do they have a competent quarterback in Peyton Ramsey? Because elsewhere, there's a lot to like about that team. I think the answer is actually yes. But they've had some big COVID opt-outs at Northwestern too. Their best offensive lineman, Rashawn Slater, 2 starters on defense. So it'll be interesting to see how they look. And then the headline game for the league this week, game day going to be there. At Minnesota, Michigan at Minnesota. It's the prime time game. Temperatures look like they're going to be around freezing. A lot of rumors swirling around Minnesota with some COVID issues. Remember, we were told this summer they were one of the Big Ten schools that was not anxious to play this year. So PJ Fleck, when he was asked about it directly, including about Daniel Falele, I think is his name, their star right tackle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he would not. He said, hey, we may have some issues, but he wouldn't deny anything or specify anything. First start for Joe Milton. That's another game. Just so many variables in that game, and the line has moved everywhere. Total stay away from me. You have any quick thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I would probably take both Michigan and Minnesota money line. I'd probably put a little bit of money on the over and the under as well.
I love it. In fact, the more I think about it, I'm going to just do that with every game.
Can't lose.
Oh, Aaron. Perfect. All right. So, final thing. What are the thing you can't wait for? You're the most looking forward to, Aaron, is what? With the Big Ten coming back.
I like football. It's fun to watch, even without the crowds there. There is something, though, about that first Big Ten night game, though, with the huge sellout crowds. Back when I lived in Minnesota, I was able to go to a couple of they customarily play on Thursday nights, and I was able to go to a couple of those games and walk around on the sidelines because I had press passes then, and go just feel the energy of that. And you can feel that on the television a little bit as well. So I'm kind of missing that, but I just think even Friday night, just seeing those teams out there again, seeing the coaches on the sideline, even if it's behind a mask or a face shield or something like that. just seeing the bright lights over again, and maybe just seeing a little bit of competent defense as well. And I know the Big 12 has been doing okay this year, but seeing a little bit of competent defense. Everybody likes the offense, but I think the Big 10 and the stereotype of having good defenses, I would just like to see a little bit of that this year. So that's probably what I'm looking forward to the most. What about you?
I think I'm looking forward to the fact I've enjoyed watching the season so far. I've watched a ton of college football, but it seemed impersonal to me. Like, I don't have a personal stake in it. I'm just a pure spectator. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I'm most looking forward to is having a personal stake in it, which is also what I'm looking forward to the least, because I root for Michigan and we just lose 3 games every year, no matter how many guys we put in the NFL. So I don't get much return on my investment in that personal interest as of late, but I'm looking forward to that for sure. And then there's an old friend of mine who we grew up in the same part of West Michigan, and we both now live here, and we get together, watch every game together. And so it will seem routine. And I think routine is a happy word, happy place for us as Americans in 2020. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Big Ten Would You Rather next. All right, let's do this. Our weekly game of Big Ten Would You Rather, rapid fire edition, because we went long in the first segment. Aaron, would you rather be at Rutgers, Michigan State, or Maryland Northwestern this weekend? Which bottom feeder game would you prefer to be at if fans were allowed in the stands?
Maryland Northwestern, probably, just because I think Northwestern, if they had a competent quarterback, they would have a chance to be a very good team, like they would be most years, just because of the way that they build their program, and it pains me to say that. But I want to see what they actually look like with maybe a competent quarterback. I think Rutgers, Michigan State, that game is just going to be sadness. It's just going to be sadness. That game's going to be
fugly.
Yeah.
Just 2 teams with ugly sticks whacking each other with them. That's what that game's going to be.
Yeah, so I'd much rather do the Northwestern Maryland game. Up next, this one's for you. Would you rather bet on Rutgers or Kansas on any given week?
I'd rather bet on Rutgers. Here's why. The Les Miles factor. As a bettor, you're looking to remove as many variables as possible, right? And that's why I don't ever put Kansas games like in my picks, like since Les Miles took over at all. Because I think on any given week, they're capable of pulling no way they beat that team. And then losing 70-0, right? And so I hate that much of variance. Thank you. With Rutgers, I think we know what their identity is going to be. And Greg Schiano, he's going to want tough physical football. And he does inherit, according to my unit ratings, one of the better special teams units in the country in the conference. So at least I think I might know what kind of brand of football they're going to play every week. Against Kansas, it's really hard for me to gauge whether the number's bad or not, because I think they're just so random, being coached by Les Miles. All right, one more for you. Would you rather have Fowler Herbstreit or Gus Klatt do your favorite team's primetime game? Which would you prefer?
Well, when you have Fowler Herbstreit, generally you know it's going to be a good game. When you have Gus Klatt, you generally know it's going to be an exciting game no matter what, just because that's how Gus Johnson rolls. And
I love Gus Johnson.
I do as well, and that's what puts me over the top.
I like Joe Klatt a lot too.
Yeah,
I think he's a very, very underrated. You know, I love Herbstreit, but I think I'd rather have Gus and Klatt. I do.
Yeah, the Big Ten championship game against Michigan State, I believe it was the Beathard to Smith, like 69-yard bomb or whatever that was. C.J. Beathard, see you later. You know, that's etched into my mind. And this is not even talking about basketball season as well, where he has some fantastic calls. But I just think that they are much more interesting to listen to, even if it's not that exciting of a game on the scoreboard. Somehow he still manages to make it interesting.
Fowler's very polished, as is Herbie.
Yep.
And together they're very polished. But the tandem of Klatt and Gus, where Klatt is very polished and Gus just losing his mind.
Mm-hmm.
I love that yin and yang,
Yep.
that chemistry between those two.
Yep.
Yeah.
This final one is for you. Would you rather start the basketball season playing a top 5 team or against a cupcake?
Well, if I'm a team like Iowa, like your team, and I'm bringing back as much as I am, I want to start against a top 5 team. I want to know I've got all these, all these guys reading, highest preseason rating for Iowa before any of these guys were born, since like B.J. Armstrong played here, right? Okay, I'm worried if I'm Fran McCaffrey, I'm worried about all these guys reading all these preseason magazines, top 5 team, top 3 team, Luka Garza, Player of the Year, big consensus Big Ten favorite. You know what? Let's just play Gonzaga right away, because now I know I've got your attention the first day of camp. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now, if I'm my team, where I love my team's roster, but these are several moving parts. A couple of key transfers, a couple of big-time high school recruits. And so there's going to be more of a, hey, where do all these teams fit just a coach in his second year? Where do all these guys fit in their roles? Give me the cupcakes to start things out, to build some confidence. But I think it kind of depends on the situation that your favorite team is in going into the next basketball season. We'll come back with our Twitter poll results and this week's question of the week to wrap it up next. This week's Twitter poll, we asked who has the best chance of pulling the upset week 1 of the Big Ten football season, and Purdue against Iowa. Far and away number 1. That kind of surprised me by that big of a margin.
Yeah, and it's not really that huge of an upset. I mean, all of those other
field goal
ones,
or so.
field goal and a half, 3.5 points, whatever. So I would have to agree. Based on all of these, just point spread wise, yeah, Purdue is probably going to be the easiest one to do that. I still just have this feeling. I mean, if you're Greg Schiano and you really want to set the tone early for your team, you get them psyched out of their minds to play Sparty. And Sparty is not. Do you really believe, with a new coach, all of the attrition that they've had, do you really believe they're 2-touchdown favorite?
No, Rutgers will be one of my picks this week.
Yeah.
With the points. Yeah. But I'm telling you, keep an eye on Bloomington, Indiana.
Yep.
Keep an eye on that one.
Yep.
All right, this week's question of the week, is it just me, or does it seem like some people aren't going to stop until they destroy the Iowa football program? That is from Corey. I don't, sounds like you're a Hawk fan, Corey. I'm not. I just have lived in Iowa much of my life, so I know a ton of you, and a ton of you are friends and family members of mine. So, I'm sad when you guys are sad, provided it's not Michigan causing you to be sad, then I'm not. Okay. Other than that, though, I'm kind of sad when you guys are sad. But I'd feel that way if I were you. We talked about this earlier. I'd be feeling like these guys specifically targeted this in order to ruin our season and try to push Ferentz out the door maybe in a final year after a lot of controversy. That's how I'd feel about it. Whether it's true or not, that's certainly the perception, though, I would have, because the timing is conspicuous by any stretch of the imagination. All right, great stuff, Aaron, and all of you. Are you excited yet? Are you ready to go? We come back next week. We break down the games, look ahead to week 2, and all the storylines that accompany both of those things. For Aaron McIntire, thanks for watching on Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace.